Welcome back, my nomads. Welcome back to another Bitcast. I got Zach with me here today. What's going on, Zach?
Hey man, how you doing?
Chilling, man, chilling. So, Zach, what you been up to this week? What you been watching? What you been tuning into?
So today, just so because this is recency bias, today as soon as I finished up work, I watched that Prey movie on Hulu.
I watched it yesterday. What did you think?
Um, I guess it's one of the better Predator movies. So that's good at least.
Right.
The main thing that I had with it was the ending, with
Hmm.
how they, because Predator is always
Oh, spoiler alert, my friend. Spoiler alert.
My
Go
bad.
into it.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's you should have watched it by now. It's been out for 2 days. Anyone that has a problem with it. So without going into too much detail, I feel like when it comes to these type of movies, like the bad guy's got to win, and that's Predator. You know what I mean? And it doesn't. It doesn't at all. So it's like, excuse me, my eyes like, who? And he doesn't win. It's like, then what's the point? Like the whole point is for him to win. That's how all the Alien movies are. That's how all the Predator. Because even though in Alien, like the first one, like Sigourney Weaver doesn't really win because there's four other movies to say that she doesn't.
Yeah, and even
So,
the one that was really bad. It's not really her character; it's a clone of her character because her character died.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yes, absolutely. And we can just forget about what was it, Prometheus?
yeah, we're not even gonna go. I saw the first one. I didn't see Prometheus too. No, I mean I love. Well, I used to love Ridley Scott as a director. He's said and done some things behind the scenes that I don't agree with as of late. But he's what now in his 80s. I'm like, some of these movies and TV shows that he's doing,
I
it
feel
seems like
like
he's going a little senile.
Ridley Scott and Joe Biden need to be in the same nursing home.
We're already getting into it, folks. Hot takes, man. Hot takes.
All right. I feel like both of them have had mini strokes, so we don't know what's going on next. I'm being serious.
Oh man.
No,
Yeah.
because as soon as the Gladiator 2 was announced, I'm like, why? What is the purpose?
Why?
Are we even doing this? It's like, it was fine. First off, the movie was made 22 years ago.
Yeah. One
Why
of
have a
the
continue? Why have a continuation or a prequel of a standalone movie? Like it was a great, epic, original movie. Let's just keep it at that. There's no
that
need to
had a
even be.
clear end. It was made at a time where movies had to have an end and it had a clear, finite end. Why are you trying to draw this out? See now, he's just
So I said stroke. The front part of his brain's fried.
but
It
we
sucks though.
digress, man.
Yeah, but no, but it is awful though because you kind of see like he's made some spectacular original movies, right? And I think we've kind of talked about this before about how much origination is actually going into like Hollywood, not just Hollywood, but TV shows, video games,
Yeah.
any kind of medium at all. And I feel like we regurgitate so much of the same kind of stuff, like comic books, instead of like having to why not just make a new character or use one of the thousand characters that Marvel or DC has, but instead you want to reinvent something that fits with today's type of cultural alignment. And it's like, what's the point? And I feel like this is kind of going the same way with all these movies. Like you just want to rehash it. It's like, okay, we like the first one, that's fine. Just leave it as it is, you know?
Yeah, man.
And
Just leave it as it is. Gladiator, it was a crap storm behind the scenes to make, but it all came together. It was like kismet. It was like the movie gods needed it to be great despite everything that happened behind the scenes. And it was a great movie. So don't touch it. Don't mess with it. Like
so
it had no
here,
reason to end up as
I
good as
got a
it did.
question for you then, because Mel Gibson's doing a second Passion of the Christ. What do you think about that?
Spoiler alert, he comes back and then he disappears again. Like, come on. What are we doing here, folks? Like
His first one made a lot of money, you know? So it's one of those things where, I mean, I understand why he's personally doing it because he,
he needs
identifies
something to
because,
get back in there. He
well,
needs
he's
something to
kind
get
of,
back into the spotlight.
the thing is, what he said 15, 17, however long ago when he was on a drunken rampage then, isn't that bad compared to what people say on a regular basis now.
Sure, but I just had to look up Passion of the Christ. It was 2 hours and 7 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. So what are you going to do with a sequel where clearly, if I remember correctly, I saw it twice when it came out. I was a kid, seen it twice. He dies at the end, obviously.
And then he resurrects. You see the moment where he resurrects.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And
All
because
right.
he's got the holes in his hand.
Right.
Right. So it's, or wrist, like right here anyway, palm.
Right.
But so the thing is that
what do? You make
well,
a 2 hour movie about his resurrection?
Well, I guess it's like his path from when he
prequel.
goes into hell for a few days, and then when he's back into our world for the month and some change that it is with all the disciples and stuff, and it's leading up. So it's kind of leading up to that moment about like his torment in hell type of thing.
So that's different. I mean? That's different then, because a lot of people don't really. I mean, a lot of religious people surprisingly don't really dig too deep into their own religion, so they don't know how like mythical, like some mythical that the Bible gets. So Jesus does in the Bible go through a whole like journey after his death, like in the afterlife. So that's interesting if they went down that route, because it will become more of a CGI type movie where you got to have these colorful characters, you got to have Satan and stuff like that.
You have to, you know, or some kind of embodiment of Satan, because I feel like there's still not even a clear consensus of if Satan's an individual character or if Satan is just some kind of symbolic representation of what evil is, you know, because you have,
because it's not clear in the book.
Exactly. And you go to, and then you start looking at the other sects of, you know, monotheistic religion, like if you go to Judaism or Islam, Satan's not an individual character. It's an embodiment of evil as a whole. Right. You know, so if we're going to go down that route, like I'm very curious to see what he wants to do with that.
Because it's called the Satan, right? It's not called like Satan as a character. It's called the Satan, like a title of like the embodiment. Right. You know? And like if they go down that route, that reminds me of a movie that was supposed to come out. I don't know if you remember this, but it was supposed to come out. It was a huge title, huge big thing. They were going to make this movie. Bradley Cooper was going to play Satan, and it was about the Book of Revelation, or when it was about when the archangel Lucifer fell from heaven, fell from grace,
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a huge epic movie. I think it was Universal who was supposed to do it. Then they scrapped it because it was going to cost too much money or whatever. They retooled it and it became Gods of Egypt. That horrible movie starring Gerard Butler where it was Gods of Egypt, but all the Egyptian gods were played by Scottish actors. The guy from Game of Thrones who played Jaime played.
Ian McGregor played Jesus at some point, so you know it's
in that movie.
No, he did in some other movie though. It was like 5 years ago.
But yeah, they were supposed to do that movie. They turned it to Gods of Egypt, which flopped so hard.
When it comes, the thing is like, despite Mel Gibson's flaws, you know, when he makes movies like that, regardless if you believe in that type of thing or not, it's going to be compelling. It makes you think about it for a minute. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different perspectives and belief structures within Christianity as a whole.
Yeah,
you know,
so many different
sects. There's so many arguments about, hey, it went this way, this is what this is, you know, but the consensus is that, you know, Jesus was Son of God and all that stuff, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, you don't feel Hollywood really hit those type of things anymore, and it kind of like it kind of makes culture talk about it. You know what I mean? And that's what I like about it.
The funny thing is, Hollywood does touch it, but it does it through allegory and metaphor. Yeah, they won't do it
not directly.
Yeah, they won't do it directly because they'll end up with like a Noah situation where everybody wants to be controversial. Remember
Jeez,
that
that
movie
was
Noah with Russell Crowe?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
they'll do it through Superman. They'll do it through Neo in the Matrix. They'll do it that way. They'll have a Christ-like character, and those movies always, whether they're good or bad, always make so much money. Whenever they have a movie that's loosely based off of like scripture, it does so good in the box office. But whenever there's a movie that's based hard on scripture like Noah, flops.
It's kind of funny because our basis, like our culture, is fundamentally based on biblical laws and culture and stuff. You know what I mean? If you want to admit it or not, that's just how it is. So from the time we're born, regardless of where you're from, it's just kind of ingrained in you and it's second nature. So you kind of have this like subconscious type of relationship with it. You know what I mean? Without even knowing about it.
Exactly, bro. That's
So
why we're so drawn to it, man.
yeah, exactly. Because it's just ingrained in us from the time we're little, from the time we're little on, even if you're not if you believe in anything or not. And it's, I just want to have a movie that's just not so status quo. Like the thing is, regardless of how you feel about that in particular, that movie is the OG of all stories for the most part. Like the thing is, people either want to discredit the Bible or they want to find a way to prove it, and and it's either one or the other. Like people who are kind of down the middle, like you have an opinion of it. It's very hard to be apolitical when it comes to that in particular. It's not
Right.
like anyone's got no opinion of Jesus or God or whatever. You know what I mean? Like not even having an opinion is an opinion. Being apathetic towards it.
Yeah.
So it's no. I want to have more stories and movies that are kind of like that. That kind of like stir the pot on certain things.
I don't
And
know,
it's
man. We live in a time where opinions are taken into account by companies on whether they make a project stream or go in theaters or whatever. I myself am a big fan of all types of mythologies. And for people, I always tell people like I love mythologies, but the one mythology that's off the charts, it's crazy, Judeo-Christian mythology. Like the Bible only touches a surface of it. If you study the mythology as a whole, some crazy stuff in there. Like the Book of Revelations itself, I'm still waiting for a studio to spend like $500 million to make this crazy CGI movie based on the book or movies based on the Book of Revelations because some
it's
crazy stuff
dystopic.
happens in
It's
there.
the original dystopic
Yes.
story. Because people take it a few different ways. You have people that believe that the tribulation, you're going to have a thing called the rapture, which is still not even it's not even universally believed that a rapture even happens for believers. Like that's something that was recently adopted within the last 150 years.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So like you have that. You have the people who don't believe in the rapture, and you have the tribulation, and then you have the Antichrist, and then you have the cleansing and all that other
Then you
stuff,
have
right?
Jesus Christ in the Book of Revelations, who's just mowing people down. He's
Yeah, no,
got a
there's so many
sword.
different things to it, right? So it's like, but that's why I think dystopia novels and things always kind of like hit a chord with people, because
Right.
for us as people, we have no other, we only know but the end. Like we know what eternity is, what infinity as a concept is, but we still don't have a true grasp of eternity, of vicinity. Like for us, we have a limited conceptualization of what forever is, because we are all going to die and we're all going to end at some point. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like, yeah, you can kind of put it into words, but do you have a true grasp of it? So when it comes to something like that, I think it's just, well, one, it's going to make a lot of people upset because they're like, no, that's not how this is. And then they're going to go ahead and turn to the book and quote all this stuff. I was like, you can go ahead and parse whatever scripture you want, but just remember how many different times as the Bible as a whole has been butchered to fit whatever point of time it was, based on who the Catholic Church as a whole wanted to butcher it so they can have some kind of belief structure that fits aligned with their laws at the time. So I just think that if they're going to make something like this, whoever it is, I don't think they will, because it's like you said,
No.
right now it's just too hot, you know. And but if they're going to do something like that, it's going to make a bunch of money, because it's just going to be morbid curiosity. They're going to draw people in. It's true.
You know
You
why I
know,
think Passion of the Christ did so well? I think it's because it was like a clear cut, like it was almost like a historic biopic in a sense. There were some things, some images that were interpretative, but for the most part, it was like, this is what happened. Jesus was here. He
I mean,
died,
you can't argue that. There's certain things that are not arguable. Like, he went through a lot of those things.
So
Regardless.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you feel about him and what he was supposed to symbolize to you, like, this guy still went through a lot of hell in the end of the day.
right.
The guy
And it
was
was shot
tortured.
like a historic period,
Yeah,
whereas Noah, there was a lot of stuff that was up for interpretation, and it was shot like a myth, like an epic myth.
yeah. It was like an epic story. It's kind of like Gilgamesh with how it
Right.
was kind of structured.
Exactly.
And they never even mentioned God once in Noah. It's
Mhm.
just it's inferred, especially in
Yeah.
the end. You know what I mean? So there's never really any kind of like clear cut understanding. Like, you see that the earth as a whole is pretty much a completely nasty place, and you have all these strange creatures and stuff who are surviving and living and they came from wherever, and that's pretty much what you get out of it. Like, there's
Yeah.
not even
Creatures
supposed
that
to.
were in the Bible, but are still up for interpretation. And
Yeah,
that's where you get into trouble. If you could just pick like a period piece with like Jesus and make it look like, kind of like how Peter Jackson did with Tolkien, he made it look like a historic period piece. There's there's not going to be that much pushback. I remember in the church I grew up, there was a big debate one Sunday about, there was one side who thought they should see Passion of Christ, the other side of the church didn't think it was good, and people were having
blasphemy.
an open
Yeah,
discussion and arguing about it. My mother took me to see it. I was like, I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, I was a kid at the time, but I didn't know what to think. It was just weird to me, because it looked so real. I was a kid when it came out.
it was very brutal. Like, you think
Yeah,
about it, you watch it. When you're watching someone who's just getting whipped like that, most
brutalized.
most people who have some kind of like empathy or sympathy or any of those type of like things, there
Human
has to be an
emotion. Yeah.
emotional reaction coming from that,
Yeah.
and I did, like, I'm like, geez, this guy's just getting, and it was just so graphic, and there was a censored version of the movie because it was
Oh,
so
really?
graphic. Yeah, there was two different versions
Oh,
of
I
it.
didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So, you can say what you want about Mel Gibson, but he's very detail oriented in any of his
Mm.
movies. You know what I mean? So I'm very looking forward to seeing what he does with it. Just to, I just think that's just kind of where he's at. Like, he doesn't need any more money. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever I want. Half the people hate me anyway, so what's the point? You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess there's a freedom in that, but there's always going to be people who can't separate the art from the artist, and then there's always the question, what degree do you separate the art from the artist? People like wow, I just had a brain fart. But the guy who did Roman Polanski, you know, no one will argue that he's not a great director, but the man has been convicted of some pedophilia. So,
Of some nasty things.
and
Yeah.
one, might I remind the audience out there, won his Oscar
While
after
he
he
was
was convicted.
yes,
After he was convicted of
and he was
pedophilia.
hiding in Europe or something.
Yeah, so I will again reiterate that whole Will Smith Oscar slap and people talking about he should give back his Oscar. I don't hear anything about Roman Polanski, but I digress. But yeah, then there's like people like Woody Allen who wasn't really convicted of anything, but behavior can be put in the category of, you know. So it's like
You mean
we're
marrying your adopted daughter and having a kid with her isn't grounds for
right.
questions?
You know, I mean, apparently they got married when she was 18, but and apparently there was nothing. There may or may have not have been foul play before that, but you know, where do you draw the line between the artist and the art? You know, and then even with people who haven't committed crimes per se, but I'm looking at people like Jared Leto, who for some reason keeps getting work in Hollywood, but he's off the deep end, like sending his castmates used condoms and dead goats or something like that, holding up productions for hours because he's too into character. You know, it's like, come on.
I agree with that, but there's a lot of art, and the problem is like I think too, you have a lot of artists, musicians, actors, actresses, whoever it is, where you may not agree with their lifestyle or their views politically, whatever it is. But people, like, as soon as you feel like you got to disagree with them, you got to boycott them. You know what I mean? And it's just
Mhm.
like I feel like where was the time where it's like, yeah, I like this person's music, and I don't have to have the need to agree with what they think personally for me to not like their music still. You know what I mean?
So you're still listening to R. Kelly?
Sometimes. But you get what you're
Only at
getting
cookouts, people. Only at cookouts.
but you get what I'm saying though as a whole.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? A lot of
100%. Man.
artists do not share the same views as I do on many different levels, and it doesn't mean that I don't like them any less or how I appreciate their contribution to art. You know, it's
But I'm sure there's a line for you. I'm sure if
there's always
somebody
a
said
line.
some like anti-Semitic stuff to you, you'd be
Well,
like,
yeah,
all
of
right,
course. If they're yeah, any of that stuff. Like, but you get what I'm saying though. But I feel
yeah,
like so many people who don't agree with someone politically, as an example, they're so quick to write them off. They're like, "Oh, I'm done with them."
right.
Like, so what? You know, like who
Yeah,
cares?
especially this time. I mean, we've talked about this online, but I mean offline, but it's like in times of like cushiness, you know, people just lose their minds and just argue about dumb stuff. And I feel like now, like an artist, let's say John Doe, could just say like, "Oh, you know, I would never be a vegetarian. You know,
Yeah,
vegetarians seem like they're always sick. You know, vegans
yeah,
always look like they're sick." How I bet you the next day John Doe's Twitter account would be flooded with hate. Like they're like, your
right,
next movie, I'm not watching. Your next album, I'm not listening to it.
right,
It's
right.
like, people, you really want to die on this hill? Like John Doe, all he said is he prefers to eat meat. He never said anything like,
I
"Oh, I
could
prefer
never be
15-year-old
famous.
girls" or something. You know,
I could never be famous and have social media because human nature is going to want you to read that stuff, and people are just so nasty. You know
yeah,
what I
man.
mean? In terms of the stuff, and I just don't, because that energy like bogs you down after a while,
I
and
know.
it's like our celebrities now are in a place where celebrities in the past have never had to deal with, and that's like the almost the culturally given obligation that you have to interact with your fan base. Like just because you're famous, that you have some kind of obligation to interact with them or give
It's
them
crazy,
autographs or
man.
give them that. I'm like, there isn't any. Yes, they're nothing without the fans at the end of the day, but they're human beings as well. You know what I mean? And you kind of have to
Exactly.
have that you have to have that respect and that understanding. Like, you know how many people out here who are famous that could just be walking in any casino or any restaurant at any given moment? I mean, anytime I go to a nice restaurant out here, there's at least someone who's mildly famous. If you think I'm gonna go up to him, like, if I like him, like, that's ridiculous. No,
Yeah.
I would never do that.
And
You
people in the
know,
public nowadays feel like just because they listen to your music or watch your movies, you owe them like some kind of like attention. And I think Halle Berry put it the best. She said, "Me as a performer, all I owe you is a good performance. That's it." I think that's the best way to put it. Like,
yeah,
you
I
don't
agree with that.
you just because you listen to their art or watch their art, you don't know this person, and they're also a person as well, so they need privacy. Like, and she said this at a time when she was getting so much crazy paparazzi that she couldn't even like walk outside with her daughter, and people were taking photos of her daughter. That's crossing a line.
Dude, yeah.
That's
Because
crazy.
the only reason why that exists is because our culture values the wrong things, and that's us having the need to be in everyone's business.
Yeah.
And if there's a demand for it, there's going to be people who are going to capitalize on that.
Right.
So that's not going to change until we have to really have like a clear understanding, like who cares about Halle Berry's kid, or if Pete Davidson and Kim
I
Kardashian
know.
broke up and Pete Davidson's a cutter and he goes to mental facilities and all this other stuff. Like
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I think Matt Damon, his strategy is the best, keep your private life out of social media, out of the public, because it lets the art shine through, as opposed to people like, oh, I'm not gonna watch this movie because this person doesn't support climate change or whatever. It's like who cares, man? Like,
Even
just
though it's
watch the
well
movie.
known, yeah, even though it's well known, like you should know right away that the majority of people in Hollywood think a certain way, and if you're not
Yeah.
going to see a movie just because of that, like you should really have some internal monologue with yourself. It's like, is this really worth it? You know?
And speaking of that, like I heard that Netflix is trying to sue Kevin Spacey for damages because the viewership for House of Cards went way down after what he did came out
Do you
into the
have?
public.
I'm looking for straws. I don't have any grasping for straws at this point.
But do you think they have a case, considering that they rely on viewership
So,
and
here's the
subscribers?
thing. I'm not a lawyer. All right. I'm not giving out legal advice, but I have a clear understanding how this stuff works. All right. Burden of proof is way different in civil than criminal.
Right.
It's with Netflix, and given how Kevin Spacey's, you know, public view has changed because of all the stuff that he's been accused of, you know, that's going to play hands in this stuff. Like you can drive more emotion than driving home facts.
Because I don't think he was convicted, right?
No, he's not. Well, he wasn't convicted because he wasn't criminally charged of anything.
Exactly. So at this point,
It
we
was
live in
that.
America. It's guilt. I
I
mean,
think that was going
innocent
on in
until guilty.
England, from my understanding, though. The one with him and I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Yeah, but it's like he wasn't convicted. So it's like if someone accuses you of something tomorrow and you're starring in a movie that you never did, you could potentially get sued by a company
Well, yeah,
for
that's the whole
something
point. You
that
can
you
get
didn't
sued
do.
for anything, and that's what I'm saying. Like civil cases are always, it's less burden of proof. You know what I mean? And I mean,
Right.
he did admit that he had a relation. Uh, Anthony Rapp, something Rapp. You
Right.
know what I'm talking about, right? I
Hmm.
forget his name. I'm sorry.
Right.
Anyway,
I'll look it
him.
up.
So he admitted that he had a relationship with him and that he could have been a minor and all this, and he used the fact that
Anthony Rapp. Yeah.
he was a homosexual as the reason why he did that. And people were like, "What do you mean? Just because you're gay, you
Right.
can go ahead and start like
You thought that
assaulting
would
kids?"
save you, you know?
Yeah, no, that doesn't. That's not a saving. Um, but no, I think it could because, like I said, because of the publicity around him in particular, like that might not go the way that he wants, you know. So I
Right.
mean that totally makes sense. But Netflix has way more concerns than just winning $5-10 million from Kevin Spacey. You know what I mean?
Especially
Because
now.
well, especially now, like I don't know if you saw this, but numbers came out today that Disney Plus has more subscribers than Netflix.
And guess what? Disney owns Hulu, which now has the highest viewed streaming movie ever. Prey.
Is that
Wow.
crazy?
That's crazy. Especially because now this is a rumor that I heard that Prey was originally supposed to come out in theaters, and then there was a deal Fox had with Warner Brothers that it would stream on HBO. Then the pandemic happened, then Disney bought out um
Fox
Fox,
Entertainment. Yeah.
And because Disney already had shares in Hulu, and then Fox had shares in Hulu, and now they have all these
Yeah,
shares in Hulu, they own Hulu. There was like part of the
let's just
deal
do it.
was part of the deal was don't put it in theaters so that we could keep the streaming rights to it. Otherwise, it'll go to HBO. So they potentially lost out on all that movie money just to keep Prey. And then it was like, oh, surprise, it was a hit. Could have got some money from this movie. People seem to like it, you know.
But more people use the ad generation from Hulu than commercial. You
Mm.
know what I mean? So that's not such a huge hit at the end of the day. HBO's got more things to worry about right now, and
But we
you
talked
know,
about HBO's problems. We talked about how this might be a good thing, them slashing all this excess fat that HBO had.
right?
Because it seems like Zaslav, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but a lot of people like to point out HBO was kind of in a convoluted place where there was HBO, HBO Max, HBO Go, HBO Now, all four different things, but they were kind of the same thing.
They all do the same stuff.
So, but there were different things that you had to subscribe for, and then David Zaslav is cutting jobs because they want to streamline it into HBO Max, which I think benefits the consumer. Yes,
It's
it
HBO
sucks that
Max
people.
now anyway, right? Because
Yeah,
you go on HBO, like HBO on demand, if you have cable, because I have DirecTV, right? And it has HBO Max in there. It doesn't like HBO is only the channel that you're watching something
right,
while you're on cable. But if you go on demand, it's HBO Max. It goes
right.
it
It's like the
directs right
streaming
into the app.
version of it, you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I but
And they're
we
not
talked
getting
about
rid of
this.
scripted content. People are talking about there was like a clickbaity title. They're not getting rid of it. They're just condensing everything, you know.
We've talked at nauseum about the deficiencies and the strange moves they want to make, and I don't know. Like it's not, I don't know. Westworld is a fantastic show. It's probably one of the best
Yes.
shows on
That
TV,
nobody's
and
talking about.
the problem is there's no renewal for next season, but it also hasn't been flat out canceled either.
I mean, that's what Westworld does, man. They do take some time to craft those seasons. They don't do like the yearly thing that most shows do.
But you at least have an idea that they're being renewed or not.
True, true.
You know, and if it's going to take that long, you got to have an idea if it's going to be renewed because it's going to be 2 years down the road before it comes out again. Then,
I mean, it's been like that for Westworld.
well, COVID happens and it prevented them because they were filming in like Bali, Singapore, and China. So that was hit pretty hard for a while. They weren't able to go to those places.
Westworld is not a cheap show at all.
No, it's
It's crazy amount of money.
yeah, it is. I was looking at how much cast it was. It was like Game of Thrones type of level, type of budget, which is insane to me. And I don't know if there's enough people that watch it to justify it.
I know, but it's so good, man.
No, it is absolutely. No, but the thing is, the HBO originals are so well done, but does it have mass market appeal?
I don't think so. Not the originals. The movies and the blockbuster stuff that they make gets more attention. Like people are talking about Black Adam. I'm like, I don't really care. I want to know if Westworld's getting another season. Like that's what I want. I want to know if there's going to be another show like Marriage. What was it called with Oscar Isaac?
Oh yeah, scenes from a
Scenes
marriage.
from a
Yeah,
Marriage. You know,
but
give
dude,
me more like that.
I don't care about DC because it's such a
Yeah,
mess. It doesn't matter to me, and it's never going to change. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at these and all this. Like you've alienated the only people who were capable of making a good movie from them. Like Zack Snyder is just you completely alienated where he
and now
wanted to
he's at
go with it.
Netflix
Yeah, good
making his own
job.
Star Wars film.
Is he?
I mean, it's a script that he wanted to do with Star Wars, but they didn't greenlight it, so he retooled it for his own IP.
It's probably gonna be great.
Yeah, I mean, people complain about his movies, but his movies always get a lot of viewers. They always entertain. Like, is he like the new Michael Bay or something like that, where people always want to complain about this certain director, but his movies are always entertaining and
I
always
see.
hit you?
That's what Star Wars should be: entertaining. That's it. And then the movies are
Not
not. The
confusing.
shows, not the show. I'm not talking about shows. I'm just talking about the movies. Since the movies aren't very entertaining, I mean, you got to have a guy who knows how to make an entertaining movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Because
And
Star Wars, for the most part, started off with very simplistic stories and just entertaining movies. Now it's a little more,
well,
complex.
they didn't have a choice because given the complexity of the universe, right? In terms of the diversity of aliens, all this other stuff. Like, yeah, it was kind of a thing, but it wasn't on that scale. Like, you couldn't have so many like the amount of effects that they had then was so groundbreaking
Yeah,
that,
man.
but it was still limited in its capacity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you had to rely on character development. That's what thrived with the original series of Star Wars. Character development, the interaction of the characters, and between the fights and all that, how do the characters interact with each other?
Let me tell you,
How?
that's what thrives in every movie. Get it
Yes,
together, Hollywood.
yes.
Character development and good story.
Sci-fi in particular. Something about sci-fi in particular, and that's why I like Mass Effect as much as I do because, like, it's a very simple game, but when you're going in between missions and talking with your crew and having these complex like discussions with them, that's what intrigues me. And Zack Snyder is probably going to have something great for Netflix, but the thing is, how much did they spend for it? Is what I'm curious about.
Exactly. I mean, we're all excited here to see what he's going to do.
Right.
Rebel Moon is called. It's going to be great, but will it be the next Prey? We'll see.
We'll see.
But my Nomads, this was another good one. Thanks, Zach, for coming on again.
No problem, bro.
Peace. Be creative.